What's cracking, people? It's your baby mama's favorite cousin T-Taw. And today we have a lesson. Today, I really have been anticipating going into this particular conversation because this topic often comes up in many conversations, whether it be in private consultations, whether it be over on Patreon, whether it be at the gym, in lunch spaces, at restaurants, everywhere. I guarantee a lot of people classify this conversation in many different ways, depending on what their perspective is, what their cultural purview is, and what they bring to the space called game in these here parts. Today, we're going to discuss, do men ever turn in their players' cards? Now, I know. Let's be honest about this. We always want to keep it P or keep it player. All right. We always want to put ourselves and those who uh, we have a mutually beneficial relationship in the best position possible to win this game called desire. However, in conversational spaces all over the internet, the subject of should a man, can a man, and does a man turn in his player's card often comes up, especially when we talk about men of a certain age, men who are beyond their 20s, men who have entered their 30s or even 40s, 50s, or even 60s. What happens? What happens when a man enters into a committed relationship? What happens when a man pulls back on his adult fun activities? What happens when he has reached a certain threshold, benchmark, or echelon in his path of masculine mastery? Well, these are the things that I want to share with you tonight. And please feel free to ask any questions. Obviously, the questions in the form of a super chat will be expedited to the front of the class. But before we really get started, let's shout out those who are in the chat early tonight. What's happening with your True Stay at 3000?
What's crabin' twin?
Salute to everyone. Let's go. Yes, indeed. Shout out to Michael.
What's crabin' twin?
Peace and blessings to you. And Espresso.
What's crabin' twin?
Yo, what's good to it? And of course,
I'll be a player for life. So where's my wife?
Shout out to Rom Wales. Of course, greetings to the master cousin T-Taw. We are definitely going to be having some dynamic, dynamite, and powerful conversations coming soon. So stay tuned for that. Isaiah.
What's crabin' twin?
Salute to you as well. What's going on, Tristan Fitness?
What's crabin' twin?
Salute to the master. Now, one of the benefits of being a teacher, of being a mentor, being a promoter of this thing that we call game, is that I'm often called upon or requested to do presentations about the experience, about how this framework unfolds in real life, in reality. And one of these presentations that I was fortunate enough to do was for a private group hosted by none other than the General Ron Wills himself. And in this particular presentation, we were discussing how players will always be needed. And let me tell you, you know that I am a bibliophile, right? A lover of books. And I have an okay library. We'll just say it's okay. Obviously, when I'm able to have a larger storage capacity, I will, greatly expand my library. But for this presentation that I did for Ron Wills and his private group, I made sure to incorporate a lot of the reflections that I've gathered over the years of my observations about being a part of this practice that we call game, mentoring other men, engaging obviously with a very, very diverse group of women from various cultural backgrounds, various classes, and also putting together a usable framework from the resources that I've acquired over the years. And one powerful resource that I used in that presentation that I'm going to present to you tonight are the teachings of the Eastern philosophical styles of the Sadhguru. Okay. This is just one of the reference works that he's put out. But this is going to make a wonderful comparison because, like I said before in a previous conversation, the more you do research, the more you are in conversations with masters and philosophers and the actual practitioners of the various domains that you hope to get better at, the more expansive the mirror of truth becomes. You see, you start to see elements of your own culture. You start to see elements of your own ethnic expressionality and the cultures and ethnicities and societies and social spaces globally. Another interesting reference that you may or may not be surprised about. This is a book that I recently acquired from a practicing pastor, okay, a church pastor, right? And you know, I like I said, I often have philosophical conversations, with people of many stripes and many backgrounds. Now, I am not a believer. I do not practice Christianity. However, when you converse with people who have a deeply rooted philosophical position, they know how to express the framework from which they derive meaning. And so he lent me this particular book. It says, He Who Gives Life. Now, this is a book covering numenology. So, for those who are not familiar with the study of numenology, it is the Christian study of the Holy Spirit. Yes, indeed. So, when I present to you various themes and various elements and the talks, the discussions, and even in the material and media that I write and I publish, just understand that it's very, very well researched and has a uh, stable, solid, and significant background from where I'm coming from and from where I am reporting. So let's just start by saying this. As with anything in life, there are levels of game. And when a player chooses to enter into a relationship dynamic with the woman or women with whom he's elevated uh, to the top positions in his life in terms of how much impact he allows them to have, we discover a few things. Now, I'm going to pull up a slide presentation that I sort of am borrowing from that particular conversation that I had with the private group. And the comparisons, I believe, are going to drive home the point of this progression. You see, in my position and in my observation, when a player reaches a certain space, a certain echelon, a certain benchmark in his navigation and his journey of masculine mastery, he doesn't hand in his player's card. There's no ceremony in which the player's card gets you know cut up just like a credit card or a membership card. When you are a player for life. However, however, there is an evolution that takes place. And in this thing that we call game, that evolution comes with expanded titles. And so, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to use the framework of the Hindu tradition of yoga, you see? And the similarities as we go through this talk should become more and more apparent to those who are watching. So we're starting out at the elementary position here. Just like in this philosophy that we refer to as game, the player is a practitioner. He goes through the various spaces and the various benchmarks of learning the game, learning who he is, learning who his counterpart is. That would be women, learning what the relationship space looks like. What is his relationship with himself? What is his relationship with intimacy? What is his relationship with women? Right? What are the experiences that have occurred early in his development that have impacted, that have imprinted, that have influenced how he relates to himself, to intimacy, and to women? And just like at the yogi level of practice, the player is on a road to mastery. And so he follows the path laid out by those who came before him in this thing that we call game. Now, fortunately for us, we have so many resources. Not only do, of course, we have resources like the seduction scriptures, right? Salute to you for everybody who has your copy of that. But of course, we have Ron Wills's book, Nice Guys and Players, right?
I'll be a player for life. So where's my wife?
Oh, but it doesn't stop there. Of course, we have to include the Pimp God's classic Pimp God, What Your Mama Should Have Told You.
You know it's hard out here for a pimp.
Right? And we have plenty of other references that I'll make known throughout this conversation this evening. The point of this is that we have a living and active structure, a framework of advice, a framework of experiences, a framework of mastery to pass down to those who are looking to traverse this path towards masculine mastery, similar to those in the yoga tradition, right? There are many books, there are many masters, there are many ways of approaching that practice. And do you know what happens when, just like a player, a yogi reaches a certain point in his development? There is a point of elevation. Now, this is one of the core positions on the elements that I recommend a man discover, acknowledge, develop, and advance within himself. This is, of course, located in my book, The Seduction Scriptures, but I also teach this over on the Patreon side, and I discuss this in private consultations. This is what I refer to as a man's cash value, or his commodifiable attributes, skills, and habits. If you recall the other day when Ron Wills and I were having a discussion about being able to rest in the essence of your lover, I highlighted the four primary elements that a man should look to uh, acknowledge in the type of woman with whom within whom he can rest in her essence. An essence is basically made up of the elements of a person, the base elements of a person. These are four for men. I highlighted four for the woman. I call it her nest appeal, her nest value, NEST, nurturing, emotionally stable, submissive, temptress, right? And so here is the natural counterpart on the masculine side. And so when we have developed these basic elements within ourselves, this is the background or the basis for our essence. This is what allows a woman to rest easy in our presence. She knows that things will be handled. She knows that she's dealing with a real man who is capable of judgment, who is capable of putting her in the best position to win. And so the next level of expansion from a player who is of a certain age and is of a certain echelon in this thing that we call game is to the Mack. You see, you've gone from player to Mack. You don't always have to refer to yourself as a player, even though player is a wonderful title to have. In my culture, when we see the type of man who has advanced game, who has progressed his ability to put everyone around him in the best position to win, he is elevated to the Mack position. Now, a comparable position in the Eastern tradition of yoga would be guru, you see? And this is highlighted as being a master teacher. Not only has this practitioner elevated and expanded through the various benchmarks thus far on his path of mastery, but he is in a position to teach others, younger men, younger practitioners who would look to him for advice. A Mack could be that barber who's legendary in his ability to keep those single moms calm when they come in with their young boys, hair all over their head. Everybody knows who I'm talking about, right? Everybody has that one barber or that collection of barber. If you're fortunate enough, a whole barbershop filled with barbers who get all kinds of action. Their motion never stops. They're hustlers. They're business owners. They're entrepreneurs. They're property owners. They have so many different ways to get after it. In other words, they are excellent at making it do what it do. And in this particular position, in the Mack position, we see that they are filled with experience and lessons and wisdom from having traveled, having engaged with this thing that we call game, and having come out on the other side successful, whether it's from a direct win or from taking an L, in which we refer to as a learned lesson, right? The Mac always has a thoughtful reflection on your issue. When you sit in that barber chair, when you seek the counsel of an established man in your community, be it a law enforcement officer, a firefighter, a supervisor on a construction site. These men have the patience, have the understanding, and have the skill set to not only listen to receive what it is that you present to them, but offer an actionable, tangible solution. And if they don't have the immediate answer, they have developed and built up a network of other men, of other practitioners who they can refer you to. You see, we know that men who have ascended to the position of Mack have things well in hand, even if it's an emergency. There's so many times, and let's be clear. All right, I am in the city of Chicago. All right, not in the suburbs or anything like that. I stay in Chicago, and so I just want to stay with the barbers because it's such a wonderful example to use. There have been so many occasions where crazy, just random stuff happened in a barbershop setting. A car accident, the fuse panel blows up, anything, a flood, a crazy baby mama or storms into the place, right? Kids are trying to misbehave. Any and everything can happen. But when you have that barber who is in the Mac position, he is cool, calm, collected, and decisive in how to problem solve in that instance. People look at him and they're just like, man, how did we, how did you know to do, I did you just talked the knife out her hand. I mean, man, he is well respected and highly regarded, no matter what his stature is relative to, those who could be wealthy or in a different class echelon. When we're dealing with a Mac, right? He's got that, that youthful fire out of him, and now that fire has been refined to a flame, to a torch, right? And so he uses that fire and he focuses that flame to build, to mend, to create. Like I said, when a player or a Mac in this instance is in the presence of his muse or a potential muse, right? A Mac is someone who immediately appreciates the work of art that this potential muse could bring out of him. You see? And the Mac is the level of practitioner who is capable of explaining to the muse and everybody around him, step by step, just how he would create that work of art. Oh, ain't no thing but a chicken wing. I would arrive at the selected restaurant. She would arrive via an Uber Black. I like a certain type of flower, right? I appreciate orchids. And so on the seat of the Uber Black would be a single orchid with a note attached. Come hungry, right? You see, a Mac already knows the end from the beginning. And he's not anxious about getting to that end as quickly as possible. You see? What separates players from Macs is that position of sageness, is that position of patience, You see, a player is high in his vitality. He is on it. He is using those skills of seduction. He is saying, hey, look, I don't have a lot of time and I don't want to waste yours. So let's get to where the part of this story where I make you have a happy ending. You see? Whereas the Mac, he likes for it to unfold. He likes for her to meet him at the restaurant, his favorite restaurant, because he's going to enjoy himself, whether she's there or not. He knows the owner operator of the restaurant. He has his ideal section. He has his signature drink, right? He understands how to communicate with the waitstaff. He is familiar with the menu options to the point where he can recommend ideas, samples. He knows that he's setting up her palate for satiation. Gives her just enough, not too much to gorge her, not too much to oversatiate her, but just enough to set the tone and to set the mood for things that are to come as the evening further unfolds. You see? The Mac is the type that when he is ready to choose, when he's ready to put a woman in that top spot, to promote a ride or die to position of first lady, he already knows that she meets the criterion, that she has those nesting elements. He already has, developed that relationship with her. He's already been through what I refer to as the cultural calendar, right? So he's able to speak to the compatibility of his first lady. You see, the Mac is in position to establish a deeper, more committed, more dynamic and fulfilling relationship with the type of women and or woman that he has desires to expand with. This is a family man. This is a community man. He not only is, like I said, an outstanding example at his vocation, but he is known around the way for being established, for being on point, the classic man, as they say. And so this is what players have to look forward to in their progression. So just to review, you do not have to be a player for life, but the player is always going to be in your life. You see? And so that is the next progression on your path of mastery within this practice that we refer to as game. You see, the Mac position is one of power, one of structure, and one of purpose. He's in a relationship for a reason, and everyone involved has a clear understanding of their position within the dynamic. Now, when we talk about culture, you see, those of us who are in a corporate space, you understand, the conversations that happen around company culture, right? And who is expected to steward that culture? That's right. That is the leadership. The one who is in that top spot, that most powerful position, whether it be the president, CEO, owner, however you want to put it. You see, when a man has ascended to the Mac position, he directs the culture. He stewards the direction and destination because he's constantly keeping that in the forefront of his conversations, of his engagements. And he integrates that into the world in which he operates. Now, don't forget to like, to share, subscribe, and make sure that you forward this particular conversation to those who you know will benefit from this ism. You see? And once again, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them down in the chat. Definitely super chats will be forwarded. And remember to holler at the Teton Tabernacle if you feel so inclined. Now, there with everything else are higher levels to this thing. You see, we've compared the player to the yogi. And the next progression beyond that is the Mack to the guru. Of course, there is a position even higher, even more expansive than those. Let's take a look. But first, I want to go through this. This is a breakdown that I provided over on the Patreon side. And I use, this is one of the teaching tools that I use with more experienced and advanced coaching clients. You see, part of the expansion of a man who's in a Mac position are his levels of social IQ and emotional EQ. Now, the stroke game got to be top tier, right? If you in the Mac position, you not only have experienced what I recommend in at least one threesome in your life, but you've had multiple, okay? If that's your get down. But you have experience with taking her through that. You know how to keep her anticipating the next session. That mouthpiece is the iron that sharpens other men and women's minds, as I exemplified with the barbershop, right? The philosophy is ever expanding. The Mac is the common man's lieutenant and the common lady's liaison. Once again, this is an expanded take on the player, putting everyone involved in the best position to win. Now, if you have a valuable skill set, why give it away for free? And this culminates in what I refer to as the exchange versus the transaction. You see, there are a lot of creators who like to refer to relationships or modern relationships as transactional. And they're not wrong with that. You see, there's a lot of pay for play. We, in fact, had a conversation just the other day about how that is so prevalent in social media spaces. However, when you are in the Mac position, the only transaction that takes place is between you and a professional. You see? And that professional has limitations, has a contract, and has the immediate as the exit strategy. You see? Shout out to Tristan Fitness. We appreciate the fan. We definitely appreciate the fan. But when we talk about the expansion and the elevation beyond just simply the player, this is that path. You see, we don't just have this terminology for nothing. This is all a part of a framework. And with the books that I've referenced so far, we have, it's like collecting infinity stones at this point, right? You throw in ARC's Rest in Peace, Who Say It Again, or Mode One, and the pending and the up and coming book by the master teacher BGS Ipmore covering the octane model, and we're almost there. We're almost there with the Infinity Stone. So there are some other books that I want to reference that I appreciated. And let's see. Look, I've got an entire library already here, right? So included in the 5 other books that I've already referenced to you. This is a book that I picked up about 2 years ago, and this is referred to as The Art of Macking by none other than Tariq Nasheed. Okay, those who know. When I went through this particular document, there were so many gems and jewels. This was, I think this was published, yeah, in 2000 or 2001, right? And after during the period of time where I was writing my book, The Seduction Scriptures, I purposely did not read anyone else's book because I didn't want to necessarily have direct, parallels to mine. I wanted my book to be something fresh, something that was new, innovative, and introduced what I have to contribute to this thing called game, specifically from the position of a seducer, specifically from a position of the type of man who would night in and night out prepare physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, right? And of course, physically to seduce women, to provide the fantasy of ecstasy to women in exchange for money. So that's a very unique and specific viewpoint and mentality and approach to this thing that we call game. And so what I ended up discovering from the book The Art of Macking was that in his experience, Nasheed uh, went through his own stages of evolution. And fortunately, there was a time in which going to the club, was still a wonderful pastime. And there were so many gems to be taken away from this particular document in terms of identifying types of women who will provide different types of outcomes, identifying bum chicks, identifying sophisticated women, and how to engage with them appropriately. So that's definitely a great resource that I think you'll find a lot of gems and jewels with. Of course, we've got another one from Nasheed referring to foundational Black American race baiter. That's another conversation for another day, but it really is a good sort of reference to how to navigate certain corporate spaces and to navigate certain social scenarios in terms of ethnicity, how to be who you are, how to discover who you are, and to stand on business. A lot of you may be familiar with the 50th law, right? Of course, this is a follow-up to the 48 Laws of Power. Robert Greene partnered with 50 Cent and went through his evolution and the various lessons that he learned on his path to becoming a mogul. Highly recommend that one. Here is another one. Now, in a different conversation, let me know if if you're interested in having that conversation about whom I view as my top 10. All right, top 10 hip hop artists. Tariq Trotter, Black Thought is on my list. Okay, I won't share with the other 9 yet. All right, but Black Thought is definitely on that list. He published a book called The Upcycled Self about his times coming up in Philly, and truly a coming of age classic that those who are able to get their hands on a copy of this will do well to secure. Finally, I'm going to reference this book here, and this is a book that I referenced on the Patreon. This is by none other than Rich Paul called Lucky Me. Now, when we talk about an ultimate hustler, all right, turn mogul, turn super agent, right? This book is a reflection of his path, with navigating, entrepreneurial life early on with his father and his store, his family convenience store in Cleveland. And it tracks his path in the road with bumps, bruises, twists, and turns on into when he ultimately met up with LeBron. And it also uh, demonstrates the ability to propel yourself forward when you have self awareness and you have a stable sort of foundation and a mentor. His father was his ultimate mentor, up into his passing. Now, I won't give away the book. Obviously, I won't give away everything in the book, but I think it's a wonderful resource for those who are looking for stories that will inspire your uh, progression on your own path of masculine mastery. And so when we talk about the next stage of ascension in this thing that we call game, having gone through the player stage, right? And you're on into your 30s and into your 40s, perhaps your 50s, and now you've graduated to the Mack position. Now, this is where a lot of men, you know, this is a wonderful, respectable position, and a lot of men go out as Macks, right? Salute to you. However, in a previous conversation with the Honorable Pimp God, I reflected on a figure in my culture that we refer to as Big Mama, right? And with Big Mama, that is the highest title that a woman in my culture can receive. She is in that position because she receives an abundance of light. She receives an abundance of cosmic life force. And from that abundance, she pours out. She gives back. She fosters those in the community who needs it. She is the ultimate complement, complement, right? If Big Mama is the queen of the community, then this next level of practitioner would be the king, right? And gentlemen, we have now arrived at the highest level of positionality within this thing that we call game. In our culture, we refer to this title as OG, you see? And the comparison from the yoga tradition would be the Swami, you see? If we could qualify what this position provides within this thing that we call game, it would be spiritual leadership. You see, that's why, the OG is the ultimate compliment to Big Mama. You see, he is the king in his community, whereas Big Mama is the queen in the community. You see, over on the eastern side, right, of things, the Swami is the elevated guru. And not a lot of people are familiar with this terminology. But really, when we talk about that ultimate level, beyond a master teacher, beyond the organizer, beyond the traveler, right, to spread the word, to spread knowledge, and to bring the wisdom of the philosophy to those who seek it. You have the Swami. You have the spiritual grounding. You have the spiritual uh, sort of positionality within that cultural practice of yoga. And on our side, in our community, we have the OG. Now, not everyone, I'll say this again, not everyone qualifies for the title or will qualify for the title of OG. Okay. And there have been, variations on what OG means. They say original gangster, original gentleman, right? Organizational general, right? But the title of OG in the community and this thing that we call game is that ultimate position, because he not only has the experience, the wisdom, the connections, the resources, the skill sets, and the ability to deploy any of these assets at any given time. He represents the spiritual aspect of the philosophical curriculum of game. You see, he is that ultimate level. He's the one in which even the Macks refer to when they need guidance, when they need counsel, when they need correction. You see? The OG is the one who has ascended to that space of spiritual leader. He is the one who is tapped in, right, with the ancestors. In my culture, we venerate our ancestors. In other cultures, he may be the pastor, he may be the imam, he may be the rabbi, he may be, the spiritual leader in that aspect. But in my culture, having an OG in your life, having the type of man who is the ultimate authority in the material realm within a community is a blessing. You see, he has been around, he has seen things, he has put so many leaders in position to win, right? So many students have come through his dojo, through his domain. He's more than likely retired. He's more than likely independently wealthy. He is so connected within his community space and within his greater region. You see, an OG is a universal patriarch, and not in the sense of, what the classic Western tradition qualifies as a patriarch, but he is the true steward of his domain. You see, ascending to OG status, right, means that you have universal respect. People look out for the OG, just like they look out for Big Mama. People protect the OG. And people are definitely on an OG's payroll, right? Because he's either hooked you up with the job, or he's hired you outright to be able to facilitate a operation that the OG is performing for the community. You see, here's a quick question. Says, what movie characters or celebrities would equate to each category? Player, Mack, and OG. And so that's a great homework assignment. I would say that's a great homework assignment to to endeavor to try to figure out in your spare time. Play this back and try to match them up because now you have the template, right? Obviously, there's a Denzel who would be at the OG position, no doubt, very easily, right? Uh, I wouldn't say that Michael B. Jordan is a player by any stretch of the words, okay? But you know, he represents that new energy, that young energy. I would say Jamie Foxx, if he had a better track record for consistency, would be in the Mack position. But those are just three that come off the top of the head that you can you know, shift around to try to facilitate those three positions of player, Mac, and OG. But what I really want to be taken away from this conversation is that men who are on the path of masculine mastery don't have to think that they have to maintain the player title, simply the player title, because players are players for life. Let's just be clear. Players are players for life. And in that they have the understanding, the mentality, the instinct, right, of one who puts everybody involved in the best position to win that game that we call desire, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Master Yao would definitely be an OG. Definitely is an OG. Salute to Master Yao. But what I really want you all to take away is that there are levels to this thing. There are definite levels to this thing that we call game. And elevating through the Mac position and ultimately reaching out for the position of OG. And let's be clear. Now let's be clear about this part. All right. OG is a status that is bestowed upon a man by the community. You see, you can't just go around calling yourself an OG. That position is earned through years of demonstrating that you know, you have domain mastery, that you truly have the connections and you have the track record of putting everybody that you've known who have followed your counsel in the best position, not only to win, but to set up their legacies. You see, winning in terms of this thing that we call game is more than just desire, fulfilling those desires, satisfying those who you are in a relationship with. Winning has to do with the varying expressions of masculine mastery. And legacy is a great part of this expressionality of masculine mastery. You see, the OG is the most honorable position to attain. It represents an evolution of a max mission over time, because legacy in your mission, right? Your legacy is probably the ultimate expression of your mission, but these are different. These are different examples of elements that you discover, that you are aware of, that you embrace, that you develop, and that you ultimately execute on your way to mastery. Lou from the 041 says, Uncle Tita, Uncle Ram, Wills, and Uncle Pimp God are OGs. I appreciate that. I wouldn't consider myself to be an OG, but I appreciate that. I'm happy with the Mac title. Always a player, definitely. But I definitely look forward to that. That is a high honor that I really, really, really look forward to being able to own. All right. When you have demonstrated over a lifetime your ability to promote, to practice, and to execute this thing that we call game, you, as I said before, ascend through these levels. And so one of the most important takeaways that I want everybody who is within the sound of my voice this evening and who will be watching in the replay is that obviously these are comparatives from my culture and from the Eastern cultural tradition of yoga. However, I want you to investigate these philosophies and see how you can apply this wisdom to your own circumstance, within your own cultural tradition, within your own social landscape. You see, that's why we're here. We're here to share the wisdom of our philosophy, ours being the philosophical curriculum of game. Everyone, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Uh, we got about 3 more minutes. I'll give it about 3 more minutes before we wrap it up. But again, if you have any questions, go ahead and put it down in the chat. This is your opportunity to really ask an informative question, perhaps a question that you may want to ask during a consultation. We'll try not to make it too personal. But if you have a question that's related to the topic or any other conversations that we've had in the past, feel free to do that now. But once again, the answer to the question, do men ever turn in their player's card? No, we do not. What we do is simply evolve. A player never retires. He evolves and ascends into the position of Mack, and hopefully, he will ascend to that ultimate position of OG. So, if that's it for the questions and comments, thank you so much for being in attendance for this particular conversation. Enjoy the replay. Like I said, like, share, and subscribe. Share this, send this, forward this to those who you know will benefit from this lesson and the others. Here's a quick question before we get out. Tristan Fitness says, how would you know when you reached a different level / position? That's a good question. Like I said, the more that you take in this knowledge that we provide, the more you're going to hear us talk about mirrors. You see, when you get into the materials, look, this is just a quarter of the books that I have here. Okay. And this is not even a small percentage of the library that I have. I can make a money phone with the books. All of these materials start to become mirrors, right? And the more that you see yourself, the more that you see elements within those reference materials that look like you, that remind you that, oh, I am involved in these activities. I execute at this level. The more it will be confirmed as to what level that you've ascended to, right? If you're a player, you have the ability, at minimum, to put everyone that you're involved with, especially with intimate relations, especially with relationships that involve having experiences, in the best position to win. Very simple. That's a player. If you're in the Mack position, you'll know that when people gravitate to you for the answer to questions about who they are. How did you find out who you are? How are you so confident? How are you so resolute? Man, look at your friends group. Look at the life that you put together. You see, a man that's in a Mack position has built the type of life with the lifestyle elements that allow him the best position for social navigation. Okay. That's a big difference. It's a big sort of expansion from the player. And an OG, you see, how you can recognize an OG is when they're able to listen to you when you present who you are to them and say, well, why don't you think about this? An OG not only can put you in connection with a resource that'll help you on your path, but they are able to give you stories like parables, right? That give you so much truth and that give you so much, you know, beneficial wisdom that you can feel the spiritual goodness and the spiritual food that's being brought across to you. So the player is relational, the Mack is social, the OG is spiritual, right? Question from TY says Darius Love Hall from the movie Love Jones would be a player. Yeah, he would be a player, definitely. Shout out to you, Espresso. Thanks for the game. Well, thanks to everyone who is in attendance. I'm going to hit that ASP Holy Ghost one last time. Absolutely. As always, this is your man, Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, saying stay sharp and mission focused. Later.